Rollers, Bill with Roll Stats, and this week we're going to be talking about campaign settings. Specifically, you building your own campaign setting, and really the 5 things that you should keep in mind if you're planning on doing that, and we're going to do that right now. So there are a lot of campaign settings out there. There are tons of different worlds that you can choose to play in, that you can choose to run, that you can choose to send your players through. Just in 5e alone, you can probably find a campaign setting to fit your style. What I mean by that is, not everyone has to build out a homebrew world. There are going to be some D&D purists who are going to tell you that unless you're building out your own campaign world, that you're not really playing D&D. Honestly, that's just not true. There's a ton of great pre-written material out there that can use because you don't have to look at simply the system that you're running. So for example, let's say you're running a 5th edition game, you can borrow hooks and ideas and legend and lore and history from any of the D&D settings that have been put out. But even if we're just looking at 5e, if you're just running a 5th edition game, the amount of pre-written settings, the different feel that you can get from the pre-written settings that have already been produced, really gives you almost any sort of world that you could possibly want to play in. So do you want traditional high fantasy, high magic? Well, then Forgotten Realms, right? Like the default setting for 5e is Forgotten Realms, and Forgotten Realms is that high fantasy, epic adventure, high magic sort of world. If you're looking for that traditional Dungeons and Dragons world, really, Forgotten Realms is your world. There's absolutely no need to recreate the wheel. You already have that world available. And the thing is, you don't have to run it exactly as written. It's yours, right? So whatever you want to change, make revisions, make tweaks, pull things out, add things in. You can take a pre-written world, a pre-written adventure. You can take the legend, the lore, the history, everything from these pre-written campaign settings, and you can tweak it to make it yours, to fit exactly what you'd like. But the bulk of the hard work has already been done for you. So let's say you don't want traditional high fantasy, high magic. You'd rather have gothic horror. Well, it's already been written for you. The thing about these campaign settings, the thing about these books that are coming out from WotC based around 5th edition, these are not just adventure books. These aren't modules that were written back in the day that will take you through a level or two. These are true campaign settings. They're going to take your players legitimately, if you wanted to, from 1 to 20, right? You can run a set of players from 1st level through 20th level in almost any of these books. Adopt what you want from here. Adopt the hooks, the things you like, the history, the legend, the lore, everything that you like, pull that into your game, make it your own, and pull out what you don't like. So you don't want high fantasy, high magic, but you also don't want gothic horror? You want steampunk? Well, you got it, right? Like, I guess what I'm saying is Eberron's got you covered. You want a steampunk adventure? Here you go. This is a campaign world. This is a pre-written setting that's ready to go for you. And again, you don't have to use everything that's included in it. You can just pull the hooks, you can pull the legend, you can pull the lore, you can pull whatever it is that you want from this particular setting and make it your own. You just pull what you like and you leave what you don't. So you don't want to do high fantasy, high magic, you don't want to do gothic horror, and you don't want to do steampunk. Let's say you want something low magic, but epic adventure, right? Well, again, you're covered, right? You can actually play in Middle-earth. It's been pre-written for you. You can find the setting that you want, the setting that fits your vision for what your world is in almost any pre-written adventure. And the reason that I know what you're saying right now is, Bill, I thought this was going to be about creating my own campaign world. And it is, right? I guess my point is, you don't have to create your own campaign setting in order to play real D&D. There are going to be people out there who are going to tell you that, well, the only real D&D is homebrew stuff, right? The only real D&D is going to be adventures and worlds that you create and build yourself. And that's simply not true. You don't need to create your own homebrew campaign world to play D&D or to play real D&D or to enjoy D&D, right? All of that pre-written material is simply there to save you time. You don't have to use it as is. You can adapt it and you can tweak it, and that's my point. That's why we started that way. So with all of that being said, let's get into actually what it takes to create your own campaign setting. What does it take to create one of these for your players to go through? What are the things you should be thinking about to create and flesh out one of these, right? Really, what we're talking about is your own campaign setting, your own campaign world, your own campaign book. What should you be thinking about to flesh this out, to flesh out your ideal campaign world? Before we get further into that, let me encourage you to watch all the way through to the end of the video. At the end of the video, I'm going to reveal how you can become a Roll Stats Insider. As a Roll Stats Insider, you're going to get access to my personal campaign world. You're going going to get access to PDF handouts that I give to my players at session 0 as an introduction to my world of Heldenwelt. And you can see in those basically how I cover the 5 steps that we're going to go over in this video. So do stay to the end of the video. And if it's your first time here, consider subscribing, consider becoming a stat roller. It's a great community. We'd love to have you here. Everyone is so great in the comments. I live in the comments. I love the comments. It really is just a great community. So please do consider subscribing. Please do consider becoming a stat roller. But enough shameless promotion, let's get to what we're all here for. And that is, what are the 5 things that you should be thinking about if you want to create your own home world? Step 1 really is good artists create and great artists steal, right? I know. That's kind of why I introed the video this way. That's why we went through all of these different campaign settings and all of these different pre-written adventures and worlds that are available to you. I guess what I'm saying is, unless you're planning on publishing your world, unless you're creating some sort of third-party supplement that you want to sell at some point, nobody says that you can't steal all of the ideas from these books, right? Like, any of the ideas that are in those books are fair game. You pull the hooks, pull the ideas, pull the concepts that you like from your favorite settings and incorporate them into your own personal setting. Put your personal flavor and flair on it. Pull from fantasy books that you're reading. Pull from Conan. Pull from Game of Thrones. Pull from your favorite writers. Pull those ideas, mash them all together, and create your ideal fantasy scenario. Nobody's gonna ask you to cite your sources. This isn't your thesis. This is your game setting. You are allowed to pull whatever it is that grabs your fancy into your own campaign world and make it yours. I promise you, nobody's going to ask you to cite your sources. And actually, it's kind of fun as you're taking your players through your own world when they recognize tropes and they recognize specific hooks, or they recognize similar storylines to things that they've already seen, read, or heard. It's kind of fun, actually. So I encourage you, take your base idea, whatever your base idea is for your world, and borrow hooks, borrow tropes, borrow specific plot lines, and meld them in. It makes for a better world. And I'll tell you something, people talk about tropes all the time. People talk about how bad tropes are. Tropes are actually a good thing, especially if you're running new players through, because that's what they know. They know tropes. Their whole idea, their whole concept of Dungeons and Dragons is based on a trope of Dungeons and Dragons. When you play to that, you're actually adding to the verisimilitude as opposed to taking it away. They are more inclined to believe in this world. There is more of a suspension of disbelief if there are tropes included within your world. I'm certainly not saying that you would rely on tropes for the entirety of your campaign, but I am saying use those tropes as a tool, pull your players in with those tropes, borrow from other settings that they might recognize, and it becomes a more believable world. When you try to present a world, no matter how fantastic it is and how well built out it is and fully fleshed out it is, if it's something completely different than what they're used to, it's going to feel alien to them. It's going to feel weird. They're not necessarily going to know what their motivations are. They're not necessarily going to know what they're supposed to do or how they fit in that world. Whereas if you give them something that they've been used to and they've seen before, they do know where they fit in. And then once they become comfortable, once they begin to believe in your world, that's when you start to add in the really crazy gonzo stuff, right? But first, you have to let them adapt. You have to let them become comfortable in your world, and then you can move on from there. So number 2 is your concept, your story, your outline. It doesn't have to be fully fleshed out, but you do need a basic concept. What kind of world is this? Is this a high magic, high fantasy world? Is this a gritty, grimdark world? Is this somewhere in between? Is this steampunk? What is your world? What's the basic concept for your world? Why is it there? In other words, what is setting it apart from any of these pre-written adventures that have already been done? I guess what I'm saying is, if you want a steampunk campaign that is just like Eberron, well then don't write your own world. Simply run Eberron. It's already been written for you. It's a lot easier, right? Save yourself the time and the headache. But if you want a steampunk world that is nothing like Eberron, again, good artists create and great artists steal. You can steal the parts that you like from Eberron and then fill in the blanks that are missing. Fill in the blanks that you think need to be tweaked. Fill in the blanks that you think need to be changed. The point is, you need to figure out what is the concept behind your world. Why does it exist? Why is it there? What's the player's purpose in that world? And you don't need to write all of this out. In other words, you don't need to create a novel. And I'm absolutely not asking you to write a novel, right? Like, in fact, when we get to step 4, you'll see what I'm saying. But I am not asking you to write a novel. I'm asking you to write a basic outline, a couple paragraphs and some bullet points. What is your world? What defines it? What sets it apart? Where do the players fit in? When you're figuring out what that basic story is, what that basic premise is, focus on what sets your world apart. What is amazing? What is awe-inspiring? What is the major purpose of that world? If you can nail that, you don't need to create a whole novel, because the whole point is the players are going to help you write that story, right? But you need to give them something to hook into. You need to give your players motivation. There needs to be a purpose for their action in that world. And then all of those details, everything within the outline, begins to get filled out by the players' actions, by the players' choices, by the things that are going on in that world. It's a living, breathing space. All you need is the genesis of that world, right? All you need is that little spark, that spark of creativity, that spark that gets your creative juices flowing, and that spark that gets your players' creative juices going. And then you begin to vibe and riff off of each other, and that's what fleshes out the details. That's what makes your NPCs come to life. That's what makes your conflict truly resonate. That's what makes the world a living, breathing place. If you can nail this, and so spend some time, really think about this, if you can nail this, everything else begins to fall together. Which brings us to step 3, right? So step 3 is going to be conflict. Any good story needs conflict, right? Like, so any good Dungeons and Dragons game needs conflict. Once you've established your outline, what is your world and why does it exist? Now you focus on exactly what are your players going to be doing in that world. And that's where conflict comes in, right? There has to be an antagonist and a protagonist. And your players don't necessarily have to be the protagonists, right? Like, your players could be the antagonists. The point is, there has to be conflict. What is that conflict? What does it look like? Where do the players fit into the world? What is the impetus for your players to get up and leave the tavern and go do whatever it is that they're going to do? And here's the thing, right? Much like many D&D purists are going to tell you that you're not really playing real D&D unless you write your own campaign setting, and we know that that's not necessarily true, but there are going to be many D&D purists out there who are going to tell you that you're not playing real D&D if you're running a railroad game versus a sandbox game, or that you're running a sandbox game versus a railroad game. Here's the thing, railroading, sandboxing, both of those are tools, right? What I'm saying is neither are inherently bad. And I need you to understand this, because there are going to be extremists on either side of the fence. There are going to be extremists who are going to tell you, if you're not running a sandbox game, then you're not playing real D&D and your players aren't having fun. And there are going to be people who are telling you, if you're not running your game, if you're not running a railroad type game where you're giving your players the plot hooks, then they're destroying your story. What I'm here to tell you is that extremists are always bad, right? Like, it doesn't matter which side they're on, extremists are bad. Railroading is not bad inherently. It's a tool. If you use it all the time, if you use it to the extreme, it's bad. Sandboxing is not bad. Inherently, it's a tool, unless you take it to the extreme and your players have absolutely no idea what to do and no hooks to follow, and so they can go anywhere and you have to build out your entire world from scratch before you can even begin to playing. You don't want to do that, right? So forget the extremes, and as you're figuring out your conflict, what you want to think is 3 to 5 hooks. Give them 3 to 5 hooks. Give your players 3 to 5 hooks or rumors or places of interest that they could possibly go visit and let them choose, right? You're allowing them a sandbox, but you're also not having to build out everything from the beginning. It'll take you 5 years before you can start your game. You'll get your party together and you'll be like, well, we're going to play in my own homebrew campaign world. I'll get back to you guys in 5 years and we can schedule, because I have to build everything out. That's insane. And that is absolutely not the way that I would suggest that you start out. In fact, the very next point 4, is going to be start small, right? Like, but really, don't be afraid to create conflict. Don't be afraid to assign your big bad evil guy from the beginning. Don't be afraid to introduce your big bad evil guy to your players from the very beginning. Hell, session 1, introduce the big bad evil guy to your players. Obviously, they're not going to fight and kill him at that point, but have an introduction, whether that's in person, whether they meet him in person, or whether they hear about him, or whether there are rumors that roll down. The point is, introduce conflict early and introduce conflict often. Don't fall into the trap where people are telling you that you're railroading your players into doing something. You're forcing this conflict upon them. That's the whole point of the game, right? Dungeons and Dragons without conflict is, I don't even know what that is. Dungeons and Dragons without conflict is just boring, right? So Don't be boring. Introduce conflict to your game. Think about what that conflict is. Think about who the big bad evil guy is, but also think about who his minions are, right? Or maybe there are multiple big bad evil guys. It all depends on the concept of your world and where that conflict evolves. But you have to think about conflict. There has to be levels of conflict. So what is the larger conflict? What is the layer of conflict below that? And what is the layer of conflict below that? And how do those three layers of conflict play off of each other, right? That's what creates a world with depth. That's what creates a world that truly feels alive. Those layers of conflict, those layers within layers, like an onion, that truly makes the world feel alive. That truly makes the world feel like a living, growing, breathing place, as opposed to just this thing that you have on a piece of paper. Which brings us to step 4, right? Because right now you're asking, Bill, sounds like you're asking a lot out of me, right? Like, how am I supposed to outline my entire world, build out all of this conflict, create all of these NPCs, make sure that all of this is happening? And I'm not asking you to do it for your whole world. And in fact, I'm telling you, don't. There are 2 different theories on this, right? And it's kind of like sandboxing versus railroading, right? Most people who prefer a sandbox campaign, most people who are sandbox extremists are going to tell you, you have to build out your whole world. Start big, right? Start at a continent-wide level and build out every single city and every single municipality and all of the governmental structure and all of the warring factions. And you need to start at a continent-wide scale and then lay it in front of your players and have it completely, totally mapped and fleshed out so that they can choose wherever they want to go and they can get into whatever trouble they want to do, right? That's the one extreme. The other extreme is, and you'll hear this most often from the DMs who like to railroad, start small. Don't start with a continent. Don't even start with a country. Hell, don't even start with a region. Start with a small town and a dungeon, right? Like that's all you need to do. So that is really the old school way of doing it. Like that's like starting here. Mini sandbox. There's the keep, and then there are 4 or 5 different encounter areas around the keep, and then there's the Caves of Chaos, the dungeon. That's it. That's how you start. And if you go through this, it really tells you that's how you start. This is a microcosm, and then you build out from there. That's kind of the old school way of doing it. It is the way that I prefer to do it, but what I'm saying is don't railroad, create a mini sandbox, as opposed to this, right? How long would it take you to write out and fully flesh out this book, this campaign setting? This is 256 pages, and I'm saying this is great, right? Like this is great information. 256 pages worth of information is fantastic, but do you have time to write 256 pages of text before you finally take someone through your sandbox, right? No, that's insane. Start with a mini sandbox, right? Start small, think small. Create a town, create a small city, create some encounter areas around that city, create some NPCs, populate some NPCs within that city. Why are your players there? What are the conflicts in that area? What is it that the players can involve themselves in around your little mini sandbox to get started? So here's the thing, right? If you start small, you can begin playing right away, but here's the beauty of starting small. This actually takes us to step 5, which is leave room for the players. Beauty of starting small, and really the beauty of building your own campaign world, is that you don't have to do it all. Your players will do most of it for you. All you have to do is take notes. So if you start small, start with a small city, a small town, a small village, right? Nothing too intricate, nothing too detailed. Develop a starting area, give them some sort of map, give them some legend and lore, give them some hooks, certainly some conflict hooks, and then turn them loose and let them run. You fill in the details based on their thoughts, their suggestions, what they do, their actions in that smaller region ripple outward, just like in real life, right? Your job really is to just listen to your players. Really, step number 5 is probably the most important part of building out your own campaign setting, and that is leave room for your players to influence it. Your players, and you know this, DMs out there, you know this, your players will sit around and have table talk, and they're going to talk about what they think the conflict is about, or what they think they're going to face next, or what they think is actually going on. Your job as a DM is to listen to that and not to use it against them, but to make it come true, to build it into the world, to allow them to be a part of the story creation. If you just want to write a novel and you want the story to go exactly the way it's going to go, then write a novel, don't write a setting. But if you really want a living, breathing world that your players feel that they had a hand in creating and that they shape and that their actions count in, then I'm telling you, just listen to them. This goes back to railroading versus sandboxing, right? In a true sandbox game, there's no story, there's no hook. The players are basically just going wherever they want. Yes, there's conflict because they find conflict wherever they go, but But the players don't really have a hand in shaping what that conflict is or what that content is, because it's already been pre-established, unless you can just improvise everything on the fly. And if you can improvise everything on the fly, my hat is off to you. You are the greatest DM on the face of the planet. But in most sandbox games, a world has been completely and totally fleshed out. The book has already been written, right? There's already 256 pages of content and conflict and legend and lore, and everything has already been predetermined. But if you provide a hook, if you, what people would consider traditionally a railroad, if you're sending your players down a particular path, you're telling a story, but they're telling it with you, right? Nothing has been pre-decided. Their actions and really what they think is going to happen plays into it. To me, that's really the beauty of Dungeons & Dragons. That's why I enjoy playing Dungeons & Dragons. It's storytelling, yes. It's narrative, yes. But it's collaborative, right? I'm listening to my players. I'm pulling the hooks that they're suggesting. I'm pulling their fears. I'm pulling their aspirations into the game. And it's not just backstory, right? Like, yes, backstory is important and you should incorporate your players' backstory into the game. But it's not just backstory. It is ongoing story, right? It should be a collaborative effort ongoing. Their actions, their hopes, their aspirations, their fears should all play into that world. It should become a reality. It should become a part of their campaign setting, because that's the whole thing. It is as much their campaign setting as it is yours. When you're homebrewing, when you're building your own world, your players are a part of that. They are an integral part of that equation. And if you don't leave room for your players, and that's why I'm saying step 5 is the most important step there is, if you don't leave room for your players, then you might as well not create a world. You might as well just buy a pre-written one, or, just take the 3 years and write yourself a novel, and you can certainly have your players play through that, but it's not going to be as fun, and it's not going to be as satisfying for them or for you, right? Or for you to play through that type of game. So those are my 5 tips for creating your own homebrew Dungeons & Dragons campaign setting. If you guys are interested in hearing more about any of these specific steps, or if you want me to go into detail, I can create a video series on each one of these steps and what it entails and how I do it. And that's the other thing, right? Just because I do it this way, or these are the things that I think of, doesn't mean that this is the only way to do it. There are tons of different ways to create a homebrew campaign setting. So hit me up in the comments down below. Tell me if you want to hear more about these specific steps. If you want me to create a series and go into this in detail, tell me what your tips are. Tell me what you think of and really your ideal campaign setting. Hit me up in the comments below and tell me about that. And then if you want to see downloadable maps and PDFs of my homebrew campaign setting, Heldenwelt, the campaign setting that I've created for my players, I have a 5e conversion that's available via PDF. I have also the regional and area map that's available via PDF if you want to become a Roll Stats Insider. So here's the thing. There's going to be a link down below in this description that's going to say become a Roll Stats Insider. And all it's going to require of you is your name and your email address. Basically, you're just going to sign up to my email list. And don't worry, I'm not going to spam you with the email list. The email itself is just going to be channel updates, notifications, so you'll get notified when new videos go up. There will also be exclusive coupon codes and access to limited time flash sales on stuff that you're going to be interested in anyway. So think D&D and RPG game books, supplements, etc., that sort of thing. So you'll have access to that, but you'll also get exclusive access to show notes and different game accessories. I have built out my homebrew campaign world over a period of 30 years now. So what you'll also get as a Roll Stats Insider, you'll get access to specific adventures that I've written and different story hooks, different parts of my world that I've fleshed out. Feel free to grab that, again, steal from that and use that in your world. Use it as is. If you do use it, please do let me know. I want to know. I mean, I want you to use it, but let me know how it worked. Let me know what you thought of it. Please do. But as your very first perk for signing up to become a Roll Stats Insider, in the link down below in the description, you will get the introductory handout. So think of it as my session 0 introduction to my new players, as well as a regional map. So it's not a world map. It's just going to be the specific starting region, because again, we're starting small. As you go through my introductory handout, think of the 5 things, the 5 steps that I just pointed out to you and how they play into that. I really built out my world in the way that I just laid out to you. So please do consider becoming a Roll Stats Insider. You're going to find the link down below in the description. Also, if you're not currently following Roll Stats, please do subscribe. Again, it is a great community and I love you guys. You are the best part of my day. Literally going going through the comments. I watch the comments like a hawk, like 24 hours a day. I don't know if you guys know this. I generally respond to your comments within 5 to 10 minutes, if that. Usually I'm right on them. But it's because I love this community and I love you guys. So please do like, share, subscribe, share this video with a friend, share this video with your gaming group, share this video with anybody that's interested in D&D or RPGs in general. And as always, may the dice roll ever in your favor.